My name's Emma. Today we are talking about another Netflix show. Right, very original. It's called The Irregulars. When it comes to choices and decisions, the ones that we make with more intention will help us create the world that we want to live in. That's what we talk about here on this channel. How can we take lessons that exist all around us in various places and bring them into our lives to effectively create the world that we want to live in for ourselves and for others? The Irregulars is a sci-fi fantasy show that is about Sherlock Holmes, but it's not directly about him. It's more around the children of the story. I don't know about the original Sherlock Holmes and all of that. I watched just because I thought it was interesting and had a cool story, and I wanted to just explore it and have some fun. So if you do know the original Sherlock Holmes or are interested in that one, that might be of interest to you since it does follow that storyline to an extent. And just like all of our other videos about Netflix, I want to go into some lessons that I learned from the show that we can all take with us into our own lives. And that first starts off with the theme of the show is really about overcoming our past, overcoming the hardships that were placed in front of us, and that is just something that keeps reoccurring, that everybody in the show is fighting with their past, their childhood trauma to an extent, and how that trauma has continued to come up into their own lives to that day, regardless if they are one of the kids in the show, one of the teenagers, or if they're one of the older ones, if they're Sherlock or his partner Watson. And regardless of which character we were to look at, all of them were facing their past, and they were unable to deal with it until they confronted it head on, faced those fears, and were able to acknowledge them and to move forward from them. And that's something that we talk about here a lot. It's really just how can we look at what has happened in our lives and deal with it head on instead of ignoring it, instead of allowing it to manifest in many different ways and to control our lives in ways we don't even understand until we do the work and look into it. In one of our last videos, we talked about one of the ways to get more in touch with our relationship with ourselves. And we can do that through various techniques. The one that was most effective for me, or one of the most interesting ones to me, was when I wrote down my relationship with on like 40 sheets of paper and then just put down different things that I interact with every single day. And that really helped me dive into what are my relationships with the world around me. And I do reference it when I feel like I'm being too involved with something that seems separate from who I am. And there's great separation between every single one of us, and a lot of the times we focus on the connection between each of us. And if we were to acknowledge the space that exists between us, we could actually create a better understanding of both of our positions in our own lives. And that's really another big theme that I saw in the show, is the connection between the two sisters was so apparent and so strong. And it is what saved them in the end, but acknowledging the separation between them would have helped them in the long run, and understanding that they have very different experiences of the world, even if they have lived so close to each other. And that is really just true for everything. And in our Netflix show, The One, we talked about how we're constantly sold this idea of a soulmate, and that we're always told that our perfection exists in somebody else. And the truth is, perfection cannot exist, even in our own selves, if we understand the importance of ourselves to ourselves. But what is important is to understand that we are connected to people, but to appreciate the separation between us, and to understand, you know what, there is this distance that we need to acknowledge and accept. And to be able to do that, we are able to then get to a better place and a better understanding of ourselves and that person, by acknowledging that this person has their own experiences, their own desires, their own things that they're going through, and they need to honor those and be in a place where they can deal with those, and that they can't always necessarily be there for you. And every time we get so egocentric, when we get so burdened by how we feel about others or how we are perceiving others or feeling about us, it is a time for us to really sit back and understand that there's a separation, and then that person is living their own lives, and we cannot force them to become anything in our own lives outside of their ability to do so. And that the way somebody feels about you is not how you should reflect how you feel about yourself. We have to have our own core belief system about ourselves, the world, so that if people do come into our lives, and they will, that we can interact with them in a peaceful way, that both parties are not affected drastically or invested overly quickly when they first meet, to give that space and that distance and understand you probably don't know enough about this person to feel this many feelings about them. And of course, there's always a love story in these shows, and there is one. And they meet, and he sees her on the street, and he falls in love, and then this show really covers a bit of their romance. But that isn't how reality works. It's a fantasy show in many ways, and that is one of them. That we're not going to see somebody on the street and immediately fall in love with them, and that's going to be our person for the rest of our lives. There's going to be things that come up, and that's not realistic. To have this unearthly expectation on someone that you don't even know yet. So there was this switch between them being so close and one of them really being the caretaker of the other, to understanding that she is strong and she is her own person and she doesn't need her around constantly, but when they need each other, they need to be there for each other. And that separation really was important for both of them to realize how strong the other is and how valuable they are by having this separation. And another big part of this is that the truth will always come to the light. I don't want to really get into how the truth comes out because that's a really big spoiler of the show, but there's a very interesting moment where they're going into the past of Sherlock and they uncover something, and it just goes to show no matter how much we want to outrun the past, how much we want to outrun the truth, we can't do it. We have to face it head on, accept it for what it is, for what we've done, and to move forward if we ever want to find peace in our own lives. We can't ever go back to our past or change it, but we can't also run away from who we once were. We have to do the work and acknowledge it and accept that is who we were at that time and move forward if we ever want to have the hope to be able to become that greatest version of ourselves. And no matter what happens, if you are lying, the truth will always come out. And that is something that is in a great deal of religious texts and science fiction and fantasy, is the truth will always come out. And it's just the reality that exists. No matter what is happening, eventually it will come to the light. It will be broadcasted. It will be shown. And we can either continue to run away from the truth and have it haunting us in the shadows, or we can face it, accept it, that it was part of our lives, and move forward. And so it's no longer haunting us. It's something that we understand has lived in our lives, but doesn't have to. We can let it rest in peace, doesn't have to haunt us. And another big part of the show is that the ending that we want may not be the ending that we get. And to also understand that that's okay, that we cannot understand what's happening outside of what's happening right now. And someday we will have perspective to be able to look back and say, this had to happen for this reason. This door had to close so that this one could open. I had to break up with this person so that I could meet this person. Someday it will make sense. And if it's not right now, that's okay. We need to understand that the reality of the world is something that is progressing in the way that it has to, and that there is no point in trying to change it. We can't wish for a better past. It's not going to happen. We can only move forward and learn those lessons and accept those lessons into our lives and move forward with them. And of course, that really is the end. At the end of the show, one of the characters has to make a choice that goes completely against who he has been for this entire show and for the entire length of his life. He had to choose differently if he wanted to change his life for the better. And this old life that he understood was the price that he had to pay to accept this new life, these new people, these new adventures into his life. And that's really one of the most important things, is that when we fall back into the habits and the actions that we used to do, that we will feel uncomfortable. And it's to show us that that's no longer what we want to do. If you used to overthink everything, you sent a text and you're like, oh my God, did I say the wrong thing? Did I do this? Did I do that? And you're starting to feel like, I don't want to feel this way. This doesn't feel comfortable to me anymore. You have to realize that you have to let all of it go in its entirety, and every feeling that was associated with it and the familiarness of that brought you some kind of comfort because it was familiar, because it was something that you had done for so long. This overthinking, this believing negatively, looking badly at the world, that was something that was familiar to you for so long that it's now something you have to let go in order to create this new life where you understand that you're a whole person who has the ability to make choices, to make change, to take chances, and that all of those are valuable and important. And if we get stuck and hung up on our past, thinking, I should have said this, or did I say this and they thought this, or all of this comes up to show us that this is no longer what we want to do. People come into our lives, people go, but what can stay forever is the lessons that they teach us, lessons about self-respect, self-esteem, appreciation, gratitude, what we do and what we don't want. And all of these lessons are really the most important part of every person that comes into our life. It's the lessons that can teach us to change for the better and to move forward in a direction that reflects the life that we want. But it begins with a choice. It begins with you understanding that this life is no longer the one that I want to live. I want to choose differently, and you get to choose every single time. And in the Irregulars, there was many choices to be made, and sometimes they didn't make the right ones, and they had to adjust accordingly until they got to the path that they wanted. And that's really just a metaphor for life. We don't know what the right decision is, but we can make a choice and deal with the consequences and adjust accordingly the next time this comes up. And the next time it comes up, you will have evidence as to which decision could be better for you. And if you mess up, you will keep being offered this same test every single time until you decide that this isn't what you want anymore. Because life will continue to give you the things that you choose. And we can always choose differently. It's always up to us. The choice has been ours forever, and it will continue to be. And the more empowered we get with these choices, we will start to see the world as a brighter and more beautiful place where we get to create it into what we want. So I hope you got something out of today's video. The Irregulars is on Netflix. I do not know if they're coming out with another season, but I believe it was released in 2020. So stay tuned. There's more videos about Netflix, about books. We're going to be going into some dives just like this for books that I have read and encourage others to read, and always spend time learning about yourself and the world that you live in, and stop wasting time on things that don't matter. And you get to choose to do that. You get to choose to spend time on things that make you feel better, that make you feel like the greatest version of yourselves, because you can be and you already are. You just have to shed away all the things that make us feel incomplete or inadequate. Hope to see you soon. But until then, have an amazing day.